Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. Welcome to my What If series, the series where we make one change somewhere in the Dexter timeline and see how that one choice ripples throughout the entire universe. And in this video, we're going to find out what happens if Dexter Morgan, a man who lives by a strict code given to him by his father, Harry, decides to break his number one rule. We all know the rules: only kill the guilty, and of course, don't get caught. But what happens when Dexter, in a moment of pure, protective rage, murders an innocent man? And not just any man, but Paul Bennett, his girlfriend Rita's abusive ex-husband. So I guess the real question is, how would a change this early in the series affect the rest of the timeline? Well, that's what we're here to find out today. And before we get started, if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. And also, comment down below your favorite Sergeant Doakes line, just so I know it's real. And with all that out of the way, let's get into it. The Point of Divergence, a code shattered. Alright, so we all remember the scene from Season 1. Paul Bennett is back in the picture, and he's making life hell for Rita and her kids, threatening this little sanctuary Dexter has built for himself. Paul's in the kitchen, just running his mouth, calling Rita a skinny bitch. The tension is just unbearable, and you can see it on Dexter's face, just this cold fury. His hand finds a cast iron frying pan. In the show we know, he swings it once, knocks Paul out, and then frames him to get him sent back to prison, where he ends up getting killed anyway. Problem solved, kind of within the rules. But in our timeline, something different happens. That dark passenger, the one that's usually so controlled, gets overwhelmed by this raw emotion. He doesn't stop at one swing. He brings that pan down again and again and again. What if Dexter Morgan, right there in Rita's kitchen, breaks his own sacred code and murders Paul Bennett? This one act, this one choice would set off a chain reaction so insane that it would completely change the story for every single character we know. When Dexter finally steps back, the scene isn't clean, it's messy, it's emotional. Paul is dead on the floor, not because he was a killer who fit the code, but just because he was an obstacle who provoked the monster. Now, this changes everything in Dexter's head. His internal monologue, which is usually this calm, procedural thought process, would just be a raging storm. Harry's voice in his head isn't a guide anymore, it's just screaming at him. "This isn't the way, Dexter. He wasn't a killer. You were reckless." For the first time, Dexter hasn't acted like a vigilante. He's acted like a common murderer. So the cleanup that follows is completely different from his usual ritual. There's no blood slide, no trophy. This is a panicked, dirty job. He's got to get a body out of his girlfriend's house, wrap it in a shower curtain, and dump it in the ocean like a piece of trash. But this kill leaves a different kind of stain. It's not satisfying. It's this festering wound of guilt. But it also plants this seed of arrogance in his mind. He thinks, the code, maybe it's more like a set of guidelines. He got away with it. He protected his family. And this newfound confidence, this belief that he can operate outside the rules, is the first step toward his entire world coming crashing down. The immediate fallout, a poisoned sanctuary. For Rita, Paul just disappearing is a miracle. One day he's there, making her life miserable, and the next, he's just gone. The abusive phone calls stop, the constant dread is lifted, and the relief she feels is just immense. But underneath it all, you know, a little bit of unease would start to grow. Guys like Paul don't just vanish. He was a leech, and he wouldn't just give up on his kids. On the surface, her life gets way better. Aster and Cody get to grow up without the trauma of their dad being in and out of prison and eventually dying there. Their home is stable, but it's a stability built on a lie that's buried at the bottom of the Atlantic. And that secret just eats away at Dexter. Every time he looks at Rita's peaceful face, he's reminded that he bought that peace with a murder that betrayed everything he was. In the original show, their bond grew because he was her gentle protector who stood up to Paul. Now, he's a protector who used the ultimate violence, and the guilt would create this new distance between them. He'd become more guarded, more secretive, and Rita, who is an expert at sensing when a man is hiding something, would feel that shift. The sanctuary he built would start to feel more like a cage, and Dexter, her savior, would start to feel like its warden. The first domino, the ice truck killer, and a reckless hunt. So with the Paul Bennett problem gone, a huge chunk of Dexter's time and energy in Season 1 is now freed up. He isn't dealing with all that domestic drama, which means he can put his entire focus on the ice truck killer case. Without the Paul situation grounding him, his obsession with the killer just goes into overdrive. And this doesn't make him a better investigator, it makes him a more reckless one. The cat and mouse game with his brother, Brian Moser, gets way more intense, way faster. Dexter is still riding high from getting away with Paul's murder, and he's overconfident. He starts taking bigger risks, trying to communicate with the killer. He's not just a blood spatter analyst on a case, he's a predator tracking a rival, and his new arrogance makes him sloppy. And you know this heightened intensity would absolutely be noticed by his colleagues, especially Sergeant Dokes. This all comes to a head in the season finale, when Brian, disguised as Rudy, kidnaps Deb. The stakes are the same, but Dexter's mindset is totally different. In the show, he chose Deb over his biological brother, reaffirming his connection to Harry's code. But in this timeline, his loyalty to the code is already broken. When Brian has Deb on the table and offers him a chance to be his true self, the choice isn't so clear anymore. But what's more likely is that Dexter's recklessness changes the ending for Deb. Maybe in his aggressive hunt for the killer, he shows his hand too early. Maybe he confronts Rudy before the kidnapping ever happens. This could lead to a scenario where Deb is never even taken to that shipping container. She'd still be traumatized that her fiancé was a serial killer, but she'd be spared that life-altering horror of being on the kill table. Dexter still kills Brian to protect his secret, but Deb's trauma is lessened. Her psyche isn't as shattered. This one small good thing comes from Dexter's original sin, but it will shape her differently moving forward, making her less broken, but also way less aware of how deep her brother's darkness truly goes. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you like this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, is it done? Great. Thank you so much. The Dokes problem, a collision course. Accelerated. Surprise, motherfucker. Sergeant James Dokes was the only one who saw right through Dexter's donut-loving act. His gut just screamed that something was off with Dexter Morgan. In the original timeline, Dokes' suspicion got sidetracked by a lucky break for Dexter. Rita found Paul's shoe, accused Dexter of framing him, and to cover his tracks, Dexter pretended to be a drug addict. This sent him to NA meetings, which gave him a perfect alibi for his weird behavior. Dokes followed him, saw an addict, and backed off for a while. In our new timeline, that lucky break never happens. There's no shoe, there's no accusation, there are no NA meetings, so all Dokes sees is a guy becoming more arrogant and secretive with no excuse. Paul Bennett just vanishing off the face of the earth? A detective like Dokes would never let that go. He would have known about Paul's threats, and for him to disappear right after a conflict with Rita's new boyfriend, Dokes would be all over it. He would start digging, unofficially investigating Paul's disappearance, and every single road would lead back to the quiet lab geek. Dokes' surveillance on Dexter would start earlier and be way more intense. He's not looking for a drug user, he's looking for a murderer. This just speeds up the collision course between them. The events of Season 2, where Dokes finds the blood slides and ends up in that cabin, would get pulled forward, happening much sooner. The confrontation is inevitable. Dexter, who is way more arrogant in this timeline without Lila to humble him, sees Dokes as just another threat to be eliminated. The outcome is probably the same. Dokes ends up in the cage, and when Lila shows up, her motivations are different, but she's still a pyromaniac. She likely still causes the explosion that kills Dokes, but the whole thing happens because of a much more direct conflict, leaving a huge question mark over Dexter's head that never really goes away. A different kind of love. The survival of Rita Morgan. Rita's death at the hands of the Trinity Killer was probably the most shocking moment in the whole series. It was the ultimate price Dexter paid for thinking he could have a family and his dark passenger at the same time. But what if the one act that set that all in motion, killing Paul, was ironically the one thing that saved her life? Let's follow the chain of events. In the original timeline, Dexter's life after Dokes was chaos because of Lila Tournay. The affair, the lies, the drama, it all made him unstable. This is why when he marries Rita and has Harrison, he's so desperate to prove he can be a normal husband and father. And that desperation is what drives him when he meets Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. He doesn't just see a monster, he sees a role model, a guy who balanced family and murder for decades. Dexter doesn't just want to kill Trinity, he wants to learn from him. And it's that delay, that fascination, that gives Trinity the time he needs to find Dexter and kill Rita. Now, let's rewind to our alternate timeline. Paul is dead, so Dexter never goes to NA meetings, so he never meets Lila. That entire chaotic Lila subplot from season 2 is just gone. Dexter and Rita's relationship moves forward without that huge betrayal. It's not perfect. The secret of Paul's murder is like a cancer between them, but it's more stable. So when season 4 comes around, Dexter is in a totally different headspace. He's a husband and a father, but his journey there has been smoother. He doesn't have that desperate need to learn from Arthur Mitchell because his own double life hasn't been so close to blowing up. When he finds Trinity, his approach is simple. He's a predator, not a student. He sees a monster who fits the code, and his only goal is to kill him. He's more focused. He stalks Trinity, learns his cycle, and takes him out. He doesn't spend weeks trying to figure him out, and because of that efficiency, Trinity never gets the chance to learn about Dexter Morgan. He never follows him home. The season ends not with a baby crying in a pool of his mother's blood, but with Dexter coming home to a living, breathing Rita. Rita survives. Harrison grows up with a mother. Dexter's first and worst sin, ironically, has the most profound consequence. It saves the life of the woman he killed Paul to protect. A Volatile Alliance. The Miguel Prado implosion. In season 3, Dexter's first on-screen kill outside the code was Oscar Prado, which connected him with assistant DA Miguel Prado. This kicked off that weird, manipulative friendship where Miguel tried to turn Dexter into his personal hitman. For Dexter, it was a huge deal. He thought he'd finally found a friend who accepted his darkness. But in our alternate timeline, when Dexter meets Miguel, he's not a guy who just accidentally crossed a line. He's a guy who crossed that line years ago when he killed Paul Bennett. That arrogance we talked about has had years to grow. So when Miguel starts trying to buddy up with him, Dexter isn't naive. He sees Miguel as a useful tool, but also as a total amateur. Dexter's mentorship of Miguel would be less about friendship and more about cold, calculated manipulation from the very start. This just makes their whole alliance way more volatile, and it would blow up much sooner. Miguel, being a massive egomaniac, would not like being treated like a subordinate. His attempts to go rogue, like targeting Ellen Wolf, would happen way faster. The careful dance from the original show becomes a head-on collision. The fallout would be public and messy. When Dexter decides Miguel is a liability, the cleanup wouldn't be as neat. Laguerta, being close with both Miguel and Ellen, would be devastated and extremely suspicious. The death of the city's top ADA would trigger a huge investigation, and Dexter's arrogance might cause him to leave a loose end, putting him on Laguerta's radar in a way he never was before. The Final Domino, the unraveling of Deborah Morgan. Deborah Morgan's entire life was just one trauma after another, and it all led to her discovering Dexter's secret in that church, which shattered her world, led her to kill Laguerta, and eventually led to her own death. But in the world where Dexter killed Paul, she never even walks into that church. Her trauma with the ice truck killer is lessened, as we said, leaving her less psychologically broken. But everything else in our new timeline just pushes her to a different, maybe even worse, breaking point. The two biggest threats to Dexter's secret were Dokes and Laguerta, and in this timeline, their threat level is off the charts. Dokes' investigation is an inferno, and Laguerta, with the public and suspicious deaths of her friends Miguel Prado and Ellen Wolf, has every reason to look deeper into the weird stuff happening at Miami Metro. Her investigation into the Bay Harbor butcher would merge with the questions about the Prado case, and all the dots would lead her right back to Dexter Morgan. And this time, she has more to work with. She might even connect it all the way back to Paul Bennett's strange disappearance. The moment Deb finds out the truth about her brother happens much earlier. It's not a shocking discovery in a church. It's a slow, agonizing realization as Laguerta presents her with more and more evidence. Deb is forced to choose, but it's not a split-second decision to shoot Laguerta. It's a long, drawn-out moral crisis. Does she protect the monster who is her brother, or does she stand with the law, her entire life's work? Given that her mind is a little less broken from the ice truck killer, it's very possible she makes a different choice. She can't bring herself to kill her boss in cold blood. Her hesitation, her moral conflict, results in LaGuerta exposing Dexter to the world. Deb doesn't kill LaGuerta, and in doing that, she signs her brother's death warrant. The secret of the Bay Harbor Butcher is out, the man who lost the code. And so, all the dominoes have fallen. The final picture is a world that is, in many ways, far more tragic than the one that ended with Dexter as a lumberjack. Rita is alive. She's raising her kids, but she's married to a man she can never really know, whose darkness has created this unbridgeable gap between them. She may never know he's a serial killer, but she knows he's a liar, and that poisons everything. Deborah is alive, but she's broken in a totally different way. Her hero brother has been exposed as a monster, and she lives with the knowledge that she's the one who couldn't save him, which might be an even heavier burden to carry. And Dexter, he's not in exile. He's either in prison for life, or, more likely, on death row. His final days are in a cage. The ultimate failure of Harry's most important rule, don't get caught. His downfall, the destruction of his family, it all traces back to one swing of a frying pan. By breaking the code to save his family, he unleashed a version of his dark passenger that was driven by emotion and arrogance. He saved Rita from Trinity, but trapped her in a lie. He saved Deb from the kill table, but led her to total ruin. In the end, the ultimate irony is that by breaking the one rule meant to contain his darkness, he guaranteed that it would consume everyone he ever loved. But what do you all think? What if Rita had found evidence of Paul's murder right after it happened? How would that have changed this new timeline even more? Let me know your theories in the comments below.